Welcome to the debate.
Glad to be back.
Today we're looking at really a fundamental reversal in the history of medicine. And I don't use the word reversal lightly. If you go back 10, maybe 15 years, the flow of pharmaceutical innovation was strictly a one-way street, right? It was discovered in a lab in Boston or Basel, launched in the West, and then eventually, often 5 or 7 years later, it would trickle down to patients in the East. Asian patients just had to play this agonizing waiting game for advanced drugs.
Yeah, and usually at totally unaffordable prices when they finally did arrive.
Exactly. But as we sit here in February 2026, that script has completely flipped. The waiting game is over.
It certainly has. Though, we aren't just talking about generic manufacturing anymore.
No, not at all. We are witnessing a seismic shift where the actual first-in-class innovation is originating in labs in Suzhou and Shanghai. We're talking about things like antibody-drug conjugates, these precision biological missiles against cancer. And because they're being developed locally, the timeline from discovery to the clinic is now 50 to 70% faster than the global average. Local patients are getting early access, and Western giants like Merck and AstraZeneca are now spending billions, literally billions, to license these cures.
Right.
But the core of our debate today isn't just the science, it's the economic engine behind it. We're looking at China's dual catalog reimbursement system and this explosion of biotech. Is this model, which we might call world-class cures at local prices, is it a sustainable revolution that benefits your family, or is it a fragile economic bubble?
And that is exactly where I have to urge caution. I represent the perspective that we are looking at a sustainability trap. I worry we're dealing with a system built on such aggressive price controls that it threatens to suffocate the very innovation it's trying to celebrate.
Well, I represent the other side. I see this as the ultimate patient dividend. We are looking at a system that has streamlined regulation and leveraged massive government bargaining power to deliver faster, cheaper, and superior cures to everyday people.
I see why you might be drawn to that, given the sheer speed of the change. It feels almost too good to be true. But when I look at the economic foundations, I see major cracks. When you force price cuts of 60% or more year after year, you risk what economists call sectoral output reversal.
Right, the macroeconomic view.
Exactly. It sounds technical, but it has real-world consequences for the average person's family. We might be watching the formation of a two-tiered system that masks some very deep sustainability issues.
Let's get into those details because I think the wallet impact here is incredibly real and measurable. I want to start with how the government is stepping in to protect the patient's bank account. You've got the National Reimbursement Drug List, the NRDL, and Volume-Based Procurement, the VBP. The government uses its massive buying power to negotiate deep price cuts. Through the negotiation cycles leading up to this year, they secured average price cuts of roughly 63%.
Which is a massive hit to the manufacturers.
But a massive win for the patient. Everyday people can afford world-class medications for diabetes and cancer. And here's the kicker, hospitals have abolished the old 15% markup on drugs.
Yeah, that was a significant structural change.
It was huge. It decoupled hospital revenue from drug sales. So doctors are no longer incentivized to overprescribe expensive medications just to pad the department's bottom line. It directly lowers the patient's pharmacy bill and shifts the incentive structure from profit to patient health.
Okay, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just don't buy that the economic picture is that rosy. You mentioned the 63% price cuts as this massive victory, but let me tell you why that is a trap. We have data from a specific economic simulation, a computable general equilibrium analysis using the 2020 social accounting matrix.
Okay, you're going to have to unpack computable general equilibrium for us.
Fair enough. Think of the economy like a complex hydraulic system, right? Every pipe is connected. If you squeeze one pipe too tight, the pressure has to go somewhere else. This model shows that when you enforce price reductions exceeding 40%, you trigger that sectoral output reversal I mentioned earlier.
Which means what in plain English?
It's essentially a starvation cycle. If you force the price of the drug down too low, the manufacturers stop making money. If they stop making money, they can't reinvest in R&D. So the industry actually begins to contract. You get cheaper drugs today, sure, but you get absolutely no drugs tomorrow because the companies starve to death.
Come on, the industry isn't contracting, it's exploding. In 2024 alone, the NMPA, the regulatory body, approved a record 84 new drugs. The US FDA only approved 50 in the same time frame.
Household income actually declines in these scenarios because the sector sheds high-paying jobs. And look at the innovation filter. It is getting much, much tighter. The shortlist pass rate for the NRDL hit a record low of 41% in the 2025 cycle.
Meaning fewer drugs are making the cut.
Exactly. They are aggressively rejecting drugs. And that points to a massive glut of Me Too products. Domestic companies are still flooding the zone with similar mechanisms, and the system is having to actively block them to prevent waste.
Those slight tweaks on existing medicines proves the government is prioritizing true innovation. They're basically saying, if you aren't better, we aren't paying. We are finally moving away from generic copies and toward these biological missiles.
Biological missiles is a very strong marketing term. But does the clinical data actually back that up across the board?
Absolutely it does. This is the arena where Asian biotech is leading the world. Let's look at antibody-drug conjugates, or ADCs. Think of standard chemotherapy as a carpet bombing campaign, right? It kills the cancer, but it kills healthy cells too, which is why patients get so incredibly sick.
Sure.
An ADC is different. It's a guided missile. You have 3 parts. You have an antibody that specifically targets the cancer cell, a linker, and a cytotoxic payload, the warhead. It travels through the body, finds the cancer cell, latches on, and releases the bomb only once it's inside.
Delivering the poison directly to the tumor.
Yes, take ivonescimab. It's a bispecific antibody from Akos. They ran a head-to-head trial against Keytruda. Now, Keytruda has been a global gold standard for lung cancer for years.
Best-selling drug in the world.
Right, and in this trial, ivonescimab demonstrated a progression-free survival of over 11 months, compared to Keytruda's 5.8 months. That is nearly double the survival time without the cancer growing. That isn't copying Western drugs. That is beating them at their own game.
Okay, that is a compelling argument for the high end of the market. I won't dispute the efficacy of ivonescimab, but have you considered the mass market reality? While you have these star performers, the system relies heavily on volume-based procurement for the vast majority of everyday drugs.
VBP is what keeps the prices down for the basics.
It is, but in that arena, price is king. It's a race to the bottom. We have seen reports of quality concerns and adverse effects in VBP-procured heart and metabolic drugs. It got to the point where the National Healthcare Security Administration had to launch targeted investigations because doctors were reporting that the generic versions just weren't working as well as the originals.
But the fact that they launched investigations shows the system is working. They are actively monitoring for quality.
Or it shows the cracks in the foundation. If you squeeze the price of a heart medication down to a few pennies, something has to give in the manufacturing process. It isn't all biological missiles. There's a lot of noise in the signal.
Okay, but to balance that high-end innovation with affordability, we have to look at the reality check here. The structural reform of the dual catalog system introduced in the 2025 cycle. This, to me, is the brilliant solution to the price-volume trade-off we're arguing about.
I see it less as a solution and more as the formalization of a divided society. But please, lay out the structure.
It's quite clever. You have the basic NRDL, which is the volume play. This is for mass market essentials, diabetes, hypertension, common infections. For example, Novo Nordisk's the weekly insulin. The government buys in bulk, the price drops, everyone gets access.
Right, that's tier 1.
Then you have the new category C, or the commercial list. This is designed for the sci-fi cures, the ones that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm talking about CAR T-cell therapies for cancer, or the new Alzheimer's drugs, like Lilly's donanemab. It allows these drugs to maintain global pricing floors so the companies don't have to slash the price by 60%.
And who pays for Category C? Because the state medical fund certainly isn't picking up the whole tab.
Access is handed through commercial insurance and city-level supplementary insurance like Hui Minbao. It ensures we don't bankrupt the basic medical fund while still offering a pathway for the cutting edge.
That is exactly my point. Category C effectively privatizes access to the best cures. Let's walk through a patient journey to make this concrete for the listeners. Imagine 2 fathers.
Go on.
Father A has diabetes. Under the basic NRDL, he walks into a hospital, gets his weekly insulin, and pays almost nothing. The system works perfectly for him. Now imagine Father B develops a rare aggressive lymphoma that requires CAR T therapy, a category C drug.
A much more complex situation, obviously.
It's a completely different world. That drug isn't on the shelf at the community hospital. He can't just swipe his state medical card. He has to go to a specific pharmacy, he has to rely on those Volume-Based supplementary insurance plans, and he likely faces a massive copay. And here's the kicker. Volume-Based coverage varies wildly. If Father B lives in wealthy Shanghai or Shenzhen, he might be covered. If he lives in a rural province, good luck.
It's not perfect, I grant you.
It creates a bifurcated system. The basic catalog covers the basics. It keeps you alive.
But the real cures, the ones that actually fix the problem, require a commercial upgrade. It protects multinational corporate profits, sure, because they don't have to cut prices, but it shifts the financial burden squarely onto the middle class.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores the trajectory. 5 years ago, Father B had zero access to CAR T therapy. Zero. Now he has a pathway. Is it unequal? Maybe, but it exists. And the government is actively dismantling the barriers to access even for these high-value drugs. You mentioned the NRDL out-of-hospital dilemma earlier.
Which is a very real bureaucratic nightmare.
Let's explain what that is because it sounds highly technical, but it's devastatingly practical.
It's a cruel irony, really. The government announces with great fanfare, this cancer drug is now reimbursed. The patient celebrates, they go to the hospital, and the doctor says, yes, it is on the list, but I literally cannot prescribe it to you.
And why is that?
Because of hospital budget caps, specifically the DRG and DIP payment reforms. Every department has a strict budget limit. If a doctor prescribes a high-value drug, even if it's theoretically reimbursed, it blows their department's budget for the month. They lose their bonuses, the department gets penalized, so the drug is cheap on paper, but completely unavailable in the pharmacy.
That was the reality, yes. But that is exactly why the 2026 mandates are a game changer. We just passed a critical deadline, February 28, 2026.
Deadlines are often missed in large bureaucracies.
This one has teeth. By this date, hospitals were mandated to hold their pharmacy and therapeutics committee meetings to list these drugs. They cannot drag their feet anymore. But more importantly, for the commercial catalog, that category C we discussed, they've implemented the 3 exception policy.
I've read the policy, but implementation is always the hurdle.
The policy is specific and targeted at exactly what you just described. High-value drugs on this list are now exempt from DRG budget restrictions, they are exempt from generic substitution monitoring, and they are exempt from out-of-pocket ratio caps. The government has explicitly removed the financial penalties that stop doctors from prescribing these top-tier medicines. They are forcing the hospital doors open.
I hope you are right, I really do. But forcing hospitals to ignore budget constraints for certain drugs usually leads to financial strain elsewhere in the system. If the money flows to category C, where does it get taken from? The nursing budget? Maintenance?
It comes from the efficiency gains of the VBP on the generic side. It's a balancing act.
It's a gamble. And speaking of gambling, we need to look at the global picture. You mentioned the patient dividend earlier, but what about the companies making these drugs? This ecosystem doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right, and this is where the globalization of Asian innovation is most exciting. It's not a zero-sum game anymore. Look at the partnerships. AstraZeneca partnered with CSPC in a $5.3 billion deal. Merck signed a massive $11.8 billion deal with Biotech for their ADC portfolio.
Those are huge numbers, yes.
They are massive, and it means that Western patients in New York, London, and Berlin will soon be treated with drugs that were discovered and developed in China. The DNA of these medicines is going to benefit patients globally. It proves that the local ecosystem is creating cutting-edge therapies that the rest of the world is desperate to buy.
That is the optimistic view of collaboration. But look at the competitive reality inside China. In the 2024 NRDL, 71% of the new listings were domestic drugs. Only 26 imported drugs made the cut.
Because the domestic drugs are getting better.
Or because the playing field is tilting. Multinational companies are facing a continuous dilemma. They either accept massive price cuts, sometimes below the actual cost of production, to get into the NRDL volume game, or they retreat to the niche category C.
They're choosing category C to protect their global pricing. It's a strategic choice, not a retreat. If they lower their price too much in Asia, it references out and hurts their pricing in Europe.
It's a choice forced by a shrinking market share. And there's a geopolitical angle here too that we cannot ignore. Relying on this centralized, low-cost procurement model creates massive supply chain vulnerabilities. The economic model I cited earlier predicts that if you rely too heavily on aggressive price cuts, you damage the resilience of the industrial ecosystem.
How so?
If geopolitical friction snaps these supply chains, or if the sectoral output reversal hollows out the manufacturing base because margins are just too low to keep the lights on, the whole promise of world-class cures could collapse. You might find yourself with a really cheap price for a drug that no one can actually afford to manufacture anymore.
Well, that brings us to our closing thoughts. I see the risks you're pointing out, the budget caps, the potential for industry contraction, but I look at the trajectory. The speed and scale of this biotech boom is undeniable. Driven by regulatory efficiency and sheer purchasing power, we have irreversibly lowered the cost of staying alive.
Irreversibly is a very bold word in economics.
I believe it. The dual catalog system is a pragmatic evolution. It ensures that even the most expensive innovations, the ones that used to be completely out of reach for anyone but the ultra-wealthy, now have a pathway to the patient. Local companies aren't just copying generic drugs anymore. They are creating the future of global medicine right in their own backyards, designed to keep their populations healthy and financially secure. It's a new era of healthcare pride.
And I remain cautious. This economic miracle shows clear signs of strain. The GDP impact of these price cuts exhibits an inverted U shape.
Explain that shape for us before we go.
Imagine an upside-down letter U. As you cut prices, the economic benefit goes up. It helps the economy, people are healthier, they work more. That's the left side of the U. But if you keep cutting, you reach the top and then you start sliding down the other side. The price cuts become too deep, companies stop innovating, jobs are lost, and the overall economy suffers. I fear we are nearing the top of that curve. By forcing such aggressive price drops, the system risks shrinking the very industry it relies on. And socially, we are drifting toward that stratified society where the basic catalog keeps you alive, but the commercial upgrade is required for a true cure.
It is a massive experiment in healthcare economics. And as we've discussed, there's clearly a lot more to explore here. Both perspectives highlight that the results are going to dictate how the rest of the world balances the cost of innovation against the fundamental right to life. We'll leave it to our listeners to draw their own conclusions.
Indeed. The world is watching.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.